Today on Sports Card Investor, we're talking all things SGC grading, including an updated report about how SGC cards are selling in the market compared to PSA and BGS. My name is Jeff Wilson. By day, I invest in tech companies, and at night, I invest in sports cards. Join me on my journey to profit from the hobby we all love. Hello, sports card investors, and welcome to another episode. I hope you're having a fabulous weekend. I hope everything is well in your world, and thank you so much for tuning in today. We've got a great conversation today. We are talking about SGC grading. We are diving in deep. We're looking at what prices SGC cards have sold for. We're talking about their submission process. We're talking about the advantages of SGC and the disadvantages compared to some of the other grading shops such as PSA and BGS. So it's a conversation that will hopefully inform you so that you understand all things SGC when it comes to grading. And to have this conversation, I am bringing on a big customer of SGC's. I'm bringing on Edward Siegel from Investacard. We're going to talk more about Edward in just a second. But first, have you registered yet for the Virtual Sports Card Con 2020? The Virtual Sports Card Con 2020 is taking place starting July the 29th. It is 5 straight days streaming on our YouTube channel on Sports Card Investor. And we are going to be bringing dealers in from around the country who otherwise would have exhibited at the National. And they're going to show us cards that they would have sold at the National. And they will be available for you to bid on and buy right then and there. You don't want to miss this. Register now for free by going to sportscardinvestor.com and clicking on the Virtual 2020 in the main menu bar. Again, go to sportscardinvestor.com and click on Virtual 2020 in the main menu bar. Get yourself registered for free. All right, so I am going to bring in Edward Siegel from Investacard. Investacard is a card consignment service, but they're a little bit different than the likes of like a Probstein or a PWCC, in that Investacard will not only take the cards from you to sell, but then they also get them graded for you. And they have an exclusive deal with SGC. They get all of their cards graded through SGC, and they've actually been doing this for months, well before the recent popularity surge of SGC in the modern card markets. So Edward from Investacard has a very good customer perspective of working with SGC because he has graded tons and tons and tons of cards with SGC over many, many months. And he's going to talk about those experiences today, as long as a little bit about his story, about how he got started, his entrepreneurial journey at first, and then we're going to jump into the SGC conversation. So without further ado, let's welcome Edward Siegel from Investacard. Hey, Edward, welcome to Sports Card Investor.
How you doing, Jeff? Nice to be on. Pleasure.
I'm doing great, and I got to give you a lot of credit because you were on the SGC thing early, before anyone else was on the SGC thing when it came to modern cards. It seemed you really kind of got ahead of that trend, and that's been a very, very popular trend the last few months.
Sure. I think more and more people as we move along here, they're going to gain a lot of credibility once they see a lot more black slabs on eBay as well as on IG or whatever platform. But the more black slabs that they see, the more credibility I think that they'll build within the hobby. So it's exciting to see that grow. I always have an excitement about me, or to start with something that and build it up from nothing to something and see that grow. And that's what we've been able to do with the SGC product.
Yeah, very, very cool. We're going to talk a lot more about SGC in this show. But I would love to just first start hearing a little bit of your background. I know you actually have been around cards and even doing card shows and organizing card shows since you were really a kid.
Sure. I think I was collecting sports cards when I was as early as let's say 12 or 13 years old. My father's niece used to work for Topps Company. And one day we went over there for a family affair, and and she ended up giving me a top set, I think it was either 1983 or 1984 top set, and that's what started it off. And looking at guys like Don Mattingly, rookies, or Wade Boggs, Tony Gwynn, and that's really what started it off. And from there, I started buying cards, and my dad used to take me around to garage sales, and we would find different deals, boxes and shoe boxes of cards, and my dad would help me negotiate. And I just started collecting cards, collecting, and then started selling myself at the flea market. And then of course, when I got to somewhere around about 16 or 17, I started to do rent tables at shows and sell as a dealer. And of course, used to go around to the card shows and buy up and make deals before the show started, so I would have more inventory. And I used to hang around with a few other younger guys that really knew the market, and I was able to learn some tricks of the trade from them. And then of course, doing the card shows and selling at card shows for maybe about 3 years, I realized that being an entrepreneur, I wanted to create my own and become my own promoter. And I thought that I had some creative ways to drive in traffic. And of course, I started my own sports card show and started to go around to sell dealers on doing my show. And I was giving away free tables and everything else to build it up. And of course, we built it up, and to a point where we got to where we were renting out huge malls and bringing in some pretty big names for autograph appearances. I did that and to my mid 20s, and then of course the market crashed, and we moved on, as an entrepreneur does, to the next venture in our life. And from there, it was moving on to a wholesale distribution company that we sold fragrances all over the country, wholesale. And I was one of the first fragrance websites to launch, one of the first fragrance websites in the early 90s. And then from there, we went into cheesesteaks. We got out of the designer fragrance. We got out of the fragrance business, sold that company, exited out of there. And I always had a desire to own my own restaurant. My father was in the restaurant business, so I came up with a cheesesteak concept. And there weren't a lot of chains that sold cheesesteaks, so we created a company called Direct from Philly, and we imported the bread and the meat direct from Philadelphia. And then we opened up some stores, and of course, built that up and exited that. And as an entrepreneur does, and went into the finance business and started learning how to fund small businesses throughout the whole entire country. And been doing that for the last 10 years, helping small businesses grow through a private funding. Started working at a company for about 3 or 4 years, learned the whole business, and then raised capital, and we started a private funding company. And now here I sit, still owning that company. But here I sit, as well as, started Investacard, which is a sports card investor platform. That's, where we sit right now. We've been doing this live show on Instagram for the last 61 days in a row. We started April 1st, and we started building up this partnership program that we have at Investacard, where we help the collector or the investor build their sports card business and help them monetize on a lot of their lower end cards that they may not send out to PSA. They may not want to take a rated rookie and send it to PSA and wait 3 or 4 months or what have you. They can put it through the partnership program. We cover all the costs for all the grading, all the eBay fees, the PayPal fees. We service it, we market it, we sell it, and then the partner gets a revenue split, and they can send in hundreds, if not thousands, of cards into the platform and build a separate revenue stream for themselves. So we're helping them monetize on some of their lower end, as well as some of their higher end cards that maybe they want to flip a lot faster through the partnership program. So I think that's pretty much gives you a good rundown. At the end of the day, we're true entrepreneur and always looking for the next opportunity to build a business. So
very cool. Yeah, that's quite an entrepreneurial journey you've been on. So thanks for sharing that with us. I have to ask, you had me on your Instagram live, probably a few weeks ago, and something you did during your Instagram live, which I thought was fun, was you gave me 30 seconds. You gave me a challenge to find a particular card in my card room in my house within 30 seconds, and you gave me you told me to find a Kevin Knox card, which is not the most common card. I'm not a big believer in Kevin Knox. I'm not investing in Kevin Knox of the Knicks. However, I do own some Kevin Knox cards, and I was able to pull one out with 3 seconds left. So my question is, what percentage of the people who you do this with are able to successfully pull the card out within the 30 seconds you give them?
It's a good question, and I would probably say somewhere in the neighborhood of about it's running somewhere between 50 and 60%.
Okay, well, that's impressive. I'm surprised it's that many, but I guess you probably bring on a lot of folks with a lot of cards, right?
We've yeah, absolutely been trying to. We actually came up with a brand new game that we've been promoting, which is Pick That Slab, and where we have all 5 grading companies: PSA, SGC, Beckett, BCCG, which is still their own, and of course a small company out of West Coast right there, Florida, GMA. And then, we pick out one slab and then they have to guess. They got a 1 in 5 chance to win. And that's been pretty fun. So been trying to just create some, outside of just talking about, business and selling and buying, come up with some, creative, fun games to play to, give back to the hobby.
Yeah, you got to keep it interesting and fun. That's how, this is entertainment after all. So you got to give, you can make money with it, but it's also, it's also entertainment at the same time. So you got to keep it fun for everybody. Cool. Very cool.
Absolutely.
Well, so I appreciate your story. And, you were talking about how you have this service where people can send you cards, and you'll take care of the grading for them. And you do all of that grading that you do that all through SGC, right?
Absolutely. 100% currently right now, all through SGC. We are located in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. SGC is located in Boca Raton, Florida. And I thought that when I was building this model, I needed a company other than, PSA, which I was buying PSA and I was trading PSA, but some of the experiences that I had with the model that I was building, I couldn't wait 3 or 4 months. So I had to find a grading company that had some credibility within the hobby, and it was been around for a while, but maybe they didn't have a good footprint in the modern market. So that's how that pretty much got started.
Yeah, and that was definitely SGC. SGC has been around as an organization for a long time. They're very well known and reputable for doing older vintage cards, but they really hadn't been used much when it comes to modern cards up until recently. And as a result, the value of cards that they graded for modern cards really hadn't been very comparable, or certainly not favorably comparable, until recently. And we'll talk a little more about how that started to change. But it looks like you got some SGC cards to show us here, some of the more vintage variety.
Sure, absolutely. This is really where it probably all started. They've been been around for, I think, 25 plus years in the vintage game, and very, well respected amongst the vintage collectors within the hobby. But not so much on the modern side. So obviously, when I started back here, probably remember I was one of those guys that was in the hobby in my younger years, and I came back about 4 years ago. And the first year I was just sort of peeking around and looking, and then the second year I started to buy, and I started to watch on eBay, and I started to watch other platforms like PWCC and a few other ones, and I started to watch these auctions go off late at night, and I started to buy, and I started to buy, and of course I started to buy raw, and I started to use SGC for grading up the vintage side of it. So we were already working with them a little bit and building the vintage relationship, and then of course when I came up with this model for Investacard and the partnership program, I knew that like I said before, I needed to have a company that we could get the cards back fast, because we are a 100% sell-through platform, and the platform is for flipping. It's for selling. So we needed a company that could get us the cards back within a time frame to where within that 30-day window where we can get the cards back, get them listed, get them sold, and get the partners paid within that 30-day window. And because of how I model this out, that if you send in a certain amount of cards per month, you can times that and keep on compounding and flipping and selling. And that's where it becomes, an extra revenue stream, for some of the partners.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very neat. And I remember, when my Market Movers data tool first came out in February, you were one of the very first people to sign up for my membership program and sign up for my data tool. And then you contacted me and you said, hey, why does the tool only have prices of PSA and BGS? You got to get SGC prices in the tool. And back then I was like, Edward, come on, man, you're crazy. Like, SGC isn't really super relevant in the modern world, and I'm not in a big rush to try to get SGC in the tool. Well, how things have changed in the last 4 months, haven't they? Like, SGC has absolutely burst onto the scene. Obviously, they were helped by the fact that PSA and BGS were both shut down for a while, and due to COVID, and then SGC was able to remain open the whole time, and also helped in general just by the fact that PSA and BGS do have such a backlog, and it's finally starting to push collectors to their breaking points. I mean, PSA has a 1 million card backlog. It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, and it's insane for the collectors, maybe not so much for PSA as a company because their growth. But I think sooner or later they got to figure out a way to speed up the process, whether it's to expand or bring on, hire and train faster, and or come up with a better process. They've got the product right, and they've got the seems like they've got the right people in place there at PSA, but do they have the right process down? And I definitely I can't build my model around waiting 4 or 5 months for cards. And it's the same way for a lot of investors that are investing in cards, and for them to go through a basic service and wait 4 months, 5 months, if not 6 months. The only way it seems like you can get any cards back is if you go to the, higher, the faster, 8-day or 15-day or what have you. I know a lot of the submission groups out there that really, a lot of good ones out there. Shout out to them. They do a great job in doing these submission groups and sending out. And I love the PSA product. I started buying PSA when I first got into back into the hobby. I've made a lot of money selling PSA and flipping PSA. I've got a lot of PSA in my own, well, let's call it in our investment fund that we hold. And I wish that we could, also include PSA and get those cards back faster, but it's not the case. But if I still had to choose between one or the other, I love the SGC slab, the black slab. I think it's classy. I think that one of the other reasons why I like SGC is because they got the 9.5 grade, which is a little bit like BCG. And the 9.5 grade, we're seeing, better returns than the PSA 9. So if we're comparing those two, and then of course, SGC has that pristine 10, right? Where PSA stops at 10. SGC, if you've got, if you hit a pristine card, we're seeing some unbelievable numbers on that. So those pristine 10s can definitely match up head to toe with, the PSA 10s if you look back at some of the data. But, people have to get used to it, and they have to, they got to earn a little bit more credibility. But I think they've definitely made some headway and sort of maybe bridge the gap a little bit with both those other great rating companies.
Yeah, they have, and we're going to look at some data here in just a moment, because now I do have SGC in my Market Movers data tool, because Edward convinced me, and of course the market as a whole convinced me that SGC is really coming on, and they're going to be a factor in grading. So I do have to get them in my Market Movers tool so that we can compare what's going on with SGC prices to PSA and BGS. And we're going to look at that in just a second to show the audience how some of that has been trending. But you mentioned the grading scale. And so just kind of to educate everybody on that a little bit, SGC's grading scale is kind of almost an interesting combination of BGS's grading scale and PSA's grading scale. So SGC, like BGS, does have a 9.5 grade. But then SGC also has 2 different 10 grades. So PSA obviously only has one 10 grade, and that's their gem mint grade. BGS only has one 10 grade, and that's their pristine grade, because 9.5 is their gem mint grade, whereas SGC has a 10 mint and then they have a 10 pristine. So two different 10 grades as well as a 9.5 grade, which is just kind of one level down from the mint or the obviously the pristine.
Sure. Gives us more opportunities for, a couple of extra revenue spots, opportunities there. I think, at least that's, from what I'm seeing. I think, listen, their grading scale is, a lot of the three companies are very comparable. It depends on who you ask, right? I mean, in terms of their grading, how they grade and so on and so forth. But they're tough. They're tough on certain, definitely on certain cards. Me doing this now for like the last 3 or 4 years, I'm looking at a lot of cards. So I guess I'm, doing a lot of grading myself, and so are a couple other guys on our team, because when we get cards in from our partners, they don't just get put in a card saver. They get like pre-graded. It's almost like underwriting, a file or something like that. We sort of underwrite the card and we look at it, and we're going to clean it up, and if the card doesn't look like we think that it's going to grade out to what we feel is a minimum grade 9, which is what we have through the partnership program. On modern cards, we don't take anything less than a 9. So all we sell is 9, 9.5s, and 10s and pristine. So if we look at the card and we think that it's not going to grade up to a 9, and we're not going to send it in, and we've been getting pretty good on it. We've been doing a lot of our own handicapping, but sometimes, I'm totally off. I think this card is definitely a dead 10. I mean, there's no way, and it, for some reason or another, it comes back a 9.5 because I didn't see something. So definitely, their grading, like I said, their grading scale, I think, is very comparable to, the other two companies, but I like them because of the added 9.5 and the pristine 10. So,
and it's nice. I mean, a lot of people like BGS for that reason, that 10 pristine adds a little bit of an extra kick of value, for BGS. So some people prefer them over PSA for that very reason. And so, SGC is trying to, have the best of both worlds, maybe to a degree. And so, and if they continue to grow and continue to get more attention, then they may truly end up with the best of both worlds in terms of how the market reacts to, the prices of SGC graded cards.
It's tough to find those. It's tough to find the Beckett, though, pristine, to get a Beckett 10. It's very tough. Yeah. You don't see a lot of them on the market. And when I started back into the hobby and I did that research, I didn't buy any Beckett for that matter. I just didn't, because I wanted to buy 10s. I didn't want to buy 9.5s. I don't want to send cards in and and have a stack of 9. I want 10s. That's what sells, 10s. Whether you're a hobby, whether you're a collector, whether you're an investor, whether you're a buyer that's just coming in, what do you want? You want a 10. That's what looks good. That's, gem mint 10. And that was one of the main reasons I didn't go with doing any trading with Beckett, because there wasn't a lot out there. So the only 10s that I could buy was SGC and PSA.
I will absolutely agree with you. There is a psychological factor about having your card rated a 10 that makes you feel better about your card than if it is rated a 9.5. I 100% agree. I think that Beckett should frankly redo their grading scale so that their 9.5s become a 10, and they can still have a pristine 10, and they can still have a black label 10 if they want it, but they could have a 10 and then a pristine 10 and a black label 10. Just psychologically, that will feel better.
Their market.
It would, honestly. And the gap I've seen in my data, that the gap between PSA and BGS is expanding. So a PSA 10 seems to be getting increasingly more valuable than a BGS 9.5. And I honestly think it's because the newer collectors that are coming into the market, the newer investors, they don't necessarily know the history of these companies. They don't necessarily know the legacy of grading. They just know that if they want to try to buy the best card out there, they're supposed to buy a 10, right? Because that's a perfect 10. It's 10 out of 10. So they're gravitating towards PSA and now perhaps SGC for that reason, in my opinion.
Sure, 100%. And don't forget, SGC has that half grade all the way through. So, whether it's a 7.5, 8, 8.5, I know it doesn't mean a lot on the modern cards, because we don't want to sell any modern cards below a 9. I mean, we not 9, 9.5, and 10s. But on the vintage side, for all those vintage watchers that are watching right now, on the vintage side, that half point goes a long way. When you're talking when you're talking about vintage cards, whether it's a 3.5 to a 4, or 4.5, 4 to a 4.5. You know, it definitely, you know, there's a little bit of cheddar in between. So.
Yeah, for sure. Let's look at, I'm going to call up my screen here so we can take a look at my Market Movers data tool. And I use Zion's Prism base here just as an example to kind of show. So the bottom line of the pink line on the screen, this kind of pinkish purple line right here, that's a PSA 9 of this Zion Prism base from 2019. The yellow line is the SGC 9.5. And then the BGS 9.5 is the top line. That's the dark line. So the SGC 9.5 is hovering around the PSA 9 line. It's actually, if you look at the trend, it's starting to separate a little bit in a positive direction. So the SGC 9.5 seems to be becoming a little bit more valuable than the PSA 9 as time is going on. Now there's not a whole lot of sales of the SGC 9.5 compared to, you know, the PSA 9 or the BGS 9.5, so we don't have nearly as many data points to draw the graph off of, but it does seem to be holding its own against the PSA 9 and perhaps, you know, increasing a little bit above the PSA 9. Is that consistent with what you've been seeing?
100%. So I think I stated it earlier. The 9.5s are right up there with the PSA 9, whether it's Zion or several other cards, but not a lot of sales. But we're holding a lot of Zion 9.5s and Zion and SGC 10s, you know, over here on our own balance sheet, and not, you know, so the 9.5s. I don't know how many units you're showing. That does it show how many units sold on the 9.5s or no?
It shows a compilation here of the three. I think you can go down to the individual stats. This is based off of 15 units over the time period that we're looking at on the graph.
Yeah. So graph looks good. I mean,
yeah. I mean, it looks, you know, again, not a ton of units sold, but it's definitely looking positive in how the BGS or the SGC 9.5 is holding up to a PSA 10. And then if we go over and look at the SGC 10, here we're comparing this one I think is really interesting. We're comparing the SGC 10 mint, so not the pristine, just the mint, to the PSA 10. And so the SGC 10 mint is the bottom line on the graph, the pink line, pinkish purple line. The PSA 10 is the top line on the graph, the dark line. And so, although there's still not a ton of sales of the SGC 10 to draw a really clean line off of, but you absolutely notice a closing in recent weeks between the price of the SGC 10 mint versus the PSA 10 mint. And if you look at the trend lines, they're kind of on the path of potentially intersecting. Now, I'm not sure that's ever going to quite happen, but there's without a doubt, you know, the SGC 10 is now selling for a much closer price to the PSA 10 than how it used to be selling back in March. I mean, if we look specifically in the data on back here in March, there was about a $300 difference between these two cards. Here in March, there was again about a $300 difference exactly between these two cards. As we're getting later into March, about a $270 difference between the two cards. If we go to this price point here, we're looking at about a, again, a $270 difference between the cards. But then if we look at the more recent sales, we're looking at a $100 difference between the two cards. And then we're looking at, again, at exactly a $100 difference between the two cards. And then, you know, these again are not a lot of sales volume here, but then this one here was only a $70 difference between the two cards. So basically a gap that used to be, you know, pretty consistently a $300 type of gap in this Zion between the SGC 10 and the PSA 10 has closed to be more of about a $100 gap. Now, granted, the PSA 10s have come down in price a little bit, so it's natural the gap would close a little bit, but that's a pretty extreme closure of the gap compared to where things were a couple months ago and the difference between those card prices.
Sure. Yep. I mean, you know, we're just looking at Zion, but, you know, I know there's several other ones where, you know, they're very comparable and right up there on, you know, several different players. But yeah, it looks, it's just a matter of, them gaining some more traction in the marketplace and, more people respecting the SGC brand for modern cards, right? They've already got the respect.
And I can tell you, interacting with a lot of the members from my membership program, I can tell you that there are many of them that tried out SGC for the first time over the last 60 days when, PSA was closed, BGS was closed. I know many of them who put together, lots of cards that they decided to ship off to SGC and really try them out for the first time. And from what I've heard, they've all had a very good experience. They got obviously much better turnaround than they would have gotten from PSA or BGS. What's going to be interesting is to really watch those trend lines that I just showed over the course of the next 60 days. And that's something I'm going to be looking at a lot in my market movers data, because you're going to see more SGC cards hit the market. You're going to see more modern SGC cards hit the market in the next 60 days than probably have ever happened anytime before, maybe combined. Like you might be able to combine the last couple of years of SGC sales into what we might see in the next 60 or 90 days, because all of these folks are now starting to get their cards back if they haven't already from their very first SGC submissions, and now they're thinking about starting to sell some of these on eBay. And so you're going to see this pretty significant increase in SGC volume on eBay in the weeks ahead, and it's going to be really interesting to see what that ends up doing with SGC's card prices.
Sure. I hope so. I mean, we surely got a lot of cards that are going on to eBay through the partnership program, thousands. And I think, they've been working right through the whole pandemic, mad respect for that. And we were able to get cards back and sell and generate revenue through the pandemic when others couldn't. And, because they were closed and they're still waiting for their cards. So, I speak to a lot of guys that we signed up to the partnership program, and, they're still waiting months and months on end. And let's give some orders to Investacard. Let's see what they can do. And they've been working, and I think they're expanding. They have expanded. So the service is gonna, through the pandemic, definitely got a little bit, or the times were a little bit slower, but I think that was from a tidal wave of submissions that came in, not only from Investacard, but of course we're promoting it, and other guys were sending in, just like you said. But I think their times are going to get better. They're expanding. They got some good guys over there. So, good things to come, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And I've heard that the experience of the submission process is a good one. Can you talk a little bit more about your like what that looks like, what your experience has been going through their submission process?
So I think for us, it's a little bit different because we're local, and we're 10 minutes away. And that was one of the main reasons that for me to go with SGC as a grading company. Number one, when I found out they were local, I had to just partner. We had to generate some business together, and it grew into this. But different for us because we pick up and drop off, right? Mm-hmm. To where somebody who's in Atlanta or Chicago or wherever, they're going to go online, and I know they have a really good portal, just like PSA. You log on, create a username, password. I think when we had done it in the early stages. We went through the portal, and I had someone enter submissions, and it was easy peasy, man. Very user friendly, experience. But for us, obviously, we drop off and pick up, and the service, service is really good, and that's one of the other reasons. Service, got to have service, and building in relationships, got to have service, got to have people that we can speak to and communicate. Especially when we're not only myself, but other guys that are listening in right now that are sending in bulk orders. Got to have service, got to have communication. Can't just be A, B, C, put it through a portal and then wait. And I think that's where they separate themselves for guys that are submitting big orders or even smaller orders for that matter. So service.
Yeah, I've heard from, I've not done an SGC submission personally yet, but from folks who have, a lot of my members, As you mentioned, I heard their online portal is good. It's easy to get your cards in there and get that all registered so that they can be tracked. I've also heard other things that people like about it. Apparently, when they grade a card and they return it to you, they also give you a high-res scan of the card, of every single card that you submit in for grading. That has been a very popular feature amongst my members because, of course, if you're going to go sell that card on eBay or wherever you may sell it, having a high-resolution image professionally scanned makes your life a heck of a lot easier.
Yeah, it changes the game for a lot that's selling on eBay. And that's an extra step that they go that, maybe some of the other companies that are not going. So a little bit outside the box there and taking a high res, because the guys that sell a lot on eBay know what it is to scan cards, right? You gotta, if you're scanning professionally, with a really good scanner, there's time, a lot of time, especially when you're doing a lot of cards. So they go that extra step. It's a great part of the, service that they offer. So
yeah, for sure.
For zero cost.
Yeah, and then another thing people, of course, like about it, you touched on it earlier, but the black cases, the Tuxedo cases, as people like to call them, it's just a different look. It's, whereas the PSA slabs and the BGS slabs are clear, the SGC slabs have the black around the edges, which helps the card pop, depending on the type of card. With certain cards in particular, if you have like a card that's predominantly white, or with certain parallels, it can really make the card pop. Yeah, and you can see right there in the image you're showing on the screen, that card kind of jumps out of that case. Like that, it does, that black border around that Sandy Koufax card right there, it really does make a nice difference. It makes that card look really sharp.
Yeah. Same thing with, if you look at and if we're looking at...
It does, and if you compare to that PSA, yeah. If you compare... you can tell that's a very, very nice, it's a very, very attractive presentation of that card. If you compare to that PSA slab you've got in front of you, it's not it doesn't pop the way that those SGC slabs do. So that's definitely a nice presentation. Yeah, so there's a standard PSA Luca. Doesn't necessarily, make it pop out, the way that some of those SGC ones you were just showing did.
Yeah. And I think they're, also looking to, that's a recent upgrade there compared to their older slabs. If you go back and look at some of their older slabs, it's a big change. It's a big change, and I think they're looking to, improve on that as well on the slab, whether it's the label or what have you. So there's some, I think they're working on some exciting stuff there. They're looking for innovative and creative ways to get better. So and that's what we need in the hobby, right? So I think it's important to have that third or company in there that can. I think there's a lot of opportunity to pick up a lot of market share, and competition is good. Competition is good, especially when it's coming from a credible source. And when you have a company that can grade, they've been grading vintage cards. If they can grade a Honus Wagner card or a very older Mickey Mantle card, they can surely grade, a modern card. So.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I completely agree. Competition is absolutely good. Really, in any type of business, having competition just makes the playing field more level and keeps everyone on their games and on their toes. I mean, if you only have one grading company or two grading companies, they could kind of get away with taking 6 months to get you your order back, because what else are you going to do? But now you get a pesky third grading company in there that's starting to steal market share and capture a lot of attention. And you better believe that, the folks at Grading Company 1 and Grading Company 2 are a little shaken up by all the attention SGC's been getting. So, it's going to be a positive for the hobby without a doubt. Hopefully it kicks PSA into gear a little more, BGS into gear a little bit more. And as collectors and investors, the service that we get from all of them starts to become better because of the fact that there's someone new who's kind of shaking it up in the modern card grading world a little bit.
Sure. And with the way the hobby is moving so fast right now, and so many new collectors or investors that are coming into the hobby, who knows? Maybe there's another one that pops up that, can steal some market share or what have you. So that's where the hobby is going. There's so much going on and so many companies trying to come in. It's going to be quite to see over the next 12 or 24 months, where we're at, with this definitely coming out of the pandemic, and with, sports getting back into sports and how that's going to affect, the market. It's going to be exciting to see what the basketball market is going to be like when basketball comes back. Don't you think?
Oh, super excited about that. And hopefully this plan of resuming at the end of July in Orlando and going through October, playoffs in October, championship finals in October, that would be great. I mean, anything we can do to get sports going again. The sports card market is going to be lit on fire the moment that sports are back on TV. I'm telling you, it's this. I know things have been hot the last couple of months because surprisingly, everyone being at home through COVID has caused the market to just really heat up. But it's if you think it's hot now, just wait. Come. There's going to be so much pent up demand for sports and for, being able to buy and sell based upon actual games that are going on TV, not based upon some documentary, or something like that, right? So, I mean, it's going to be great. I cannot wait for NBA to resume, playoffs to happen, all those types of things. What we're gonna have is a very compressed second half of the year of sports. I mean, we're gonna get a full dose, well, not a full dose, but we're gonna get a compressed dose of Major League Baseball, overlapping a compressed dose of NBA, compressed dose of NHL, and the NFL, and all weaved in, all playing at the same time. For what? That would be, I guess, the first time, really ever that you would at least have the championships. I mean, you literally could have the NBA championship, the NHL championship, MLB World Series, perhaps, or at least playoffs going on at the same time while the NFL is in mid-season. I mean, wow, how dynamic of a time would that be for sports, and especially for the sports card hobby?
It's could be an overload. Could be an overload of that stuff after not having any of it. I wouldn't be surprised that the way they've changed the playoff scenario up and how they're going to end this thing. They don't look at it and let's see how it performs, how it goes. And listen, people have always said that 162 games was just too many baseball games, right? They might take this and shorten up the season and decide, hey, you know what? Maybe this is better. We can get to the championship game faster. We can give maybe some opportunity for some other cities to get in and might have not gone in because there's less games to play, and maybe they don't end up losing the division lead or what have you. But it's surely going to be exciting, especially with the NBA. The baseball they haven't made a decision on yet. Hopefully, they'll clear that up. And of course, the NFL is I think full steam ahead, for their season. So we're definitely anticipating the NBA season here. So.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun ride. I can't wait for it. Well, listen, Edward, thanks so much for coming on the show. Tell the viewers how they can get in touch with you if they'd like to find out more about your services.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us on, of course, on Instagram, on our IG, and go to, Investacard. If you're not following yet, follow us on IG. And you can also find our eBay link in there. It takes you right to our eBay. We don't have an eBay store. We run auctions only. Everything is no reserve. Everything starts at $1. We let the market speak on everything, so you can find us there. And of course, if you want to dial us toll free and speak to one of our relationship managers to get you signed up to the partnership program, they'll help you with your first submission. You can dial us toll free at 877-492-2737. It's 877-492-2737, or just shoot us an email. You can shoot me an email personally at edward@investacard if you're looking to get into the partnership program, and I'll get that information over to one of my key guys on my team, and we'll get you signed up. And I surely appreciate Jeff getting us on here, and I really enjoyed the interview. And of course, I love working with the market mover. So do my guys. I got to get my guys to use it more every day because we found, we've been finding tons of opportunities, buying opportunities. And if we're tracking that, on a 7 or 14-day basis, using the market mover, you can be ahead of the game, because I've been using it personally myself and have been finding some great opportunities. So for $1, what is it? I think, works out to be about $1.60 a day. So to add that extra bullet, well worth it. Best value on the market going on any, tool in terms of looking at data for sports cards.
Appreciate that, Edward. Thanks a lot. Thank you. And good luck with the business. Good luck with everything. And hopefully we'll both enjoy SGC's continued rise. So thanks for coming on the show.
We got to get signed up to your virtual event. So
yes, that'd be great. We'd love to have you as part of that. The virtual Sports Card Con 2020. Starting July 29th through August the 2nd, it's going to be streaming on our YouTube, and we're going to have tons of dealers from around the country coming on that event to show off, cards that they otherwise would have sold at the National, but they're going to be selling them live during our event, and you can register for free by going to sportscardinvestor.com. So I appreciate that.
All right, my man.
All right. Take care, Edward. It was great to see you. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed my interview with Edward. Certainly learned a lot there about SGC. Curious to know, have you tried SGC yet? Leave us a note in the comments below. Have you tried them? Yes or no? And if so, what have your experiences been like? Would love to hear that in the comments below from you. And if you have not yet registered for the virtual Sports Card Con 2020, go right now to sportscardinvestor.com and click the virtual 2020 in the main menu bar. As always, please give the show a subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified for new episodes. We certainly appreciate it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back again in a couple of days with our next episode. Take care.